This is Marvel's Midnight Suns, and I went into this one expecting something very different than what I got, but I mean that in a good way. I'm not saying I thought this game would be bad or anything like that, I definitely didn't. This is Firaxis we're talking about. They have managed to hone their turn-based strategy games to sort of a fine razor's edge at this point. After XCOM 2, they've gotten really, really good at doing this sort of thing, so obviously I expected the gameplay to be quite nice given who's behind it, but I do have sort of an issue with superhero games, and that is that oftentimes I feel that if a game is about multiple superheroes and not just focused on one, like say the Spider-Man games, which are really fun, I find that if there's too many, it kind of starts to feel like window dressing with like an overly grandiose story, and it becomes more about just like having a license for the sake of having a license, you know what I mean? And I was kind of expecting this game to have kind of a forgettable story, fun characters to play, but nothing like super crazy or anything like that, and totally acceptable gameplay. But honestly, I've been really surprised by this game because it's a lot more engrossing than I ever expected it to be, and it's actually become one of my favorite games of the year so far because of how much I've actually enjoyed it. But before we get on to all the superhero-y stuff and how they've managed to avoid some of the issues I have with the overall genre, what is the game itself? Well, it is a turn-based strategy game with very tactical turn-based combat, although it is quite different from XCOM mechanically. It is still recognizably by the same people, and it of course has the Marvel theming with a whole bunch of different disparate groups of characters coming together from various comic book continuities, effectively. And one thing I should already mention just from the start here is that this is not the MCU Marvel. This isn't the movie continuity of Marvel heroes, so the characters here are going to be a little bit different to you if you only really know the movies, but there are definitely some significant advantages to them making it the comic book continuities of these characters instead, because, well, in the MCU, a lot of these characters are already very familiar with each other, and there's not a lot of room for character development, but we'll get onto that in a little while. So first off, the combat of this game is pretty different than what you might expect because it uses a card-based system. But another thing about the combat that you'll immediately notice is the lack of a grid. This is not a grid-based combat system like XCOM is. It has free movement, so you and the enemies are not limited to a grid. And in fact, there's a lot of various area effects and things that take the shape of like circles and cones and the like to take advantage of the fact that there isn't a grid to snap things to. You have a lot of different heroes in your arsenal, but you can choose 3 per mission, and the mission maps are quite small in comparison to something like XCOM, but they are very lavishly detailed. Even though they're much smaller, they've clearly gone for like an action movie set dressing kind of idea because they're very reactive. You know, you smack enemies around and they explode through bookshelves and like shatter stacks of wood, and there's a lot of environmental interaction, and there's also a lot of aspects of the environment that you can deliberately use yourself to cause more damage, like throwing boxes at enemies or kicking power units at them or throwing them into explosive barrels or electric junction boxes to shock them and stun them and stuff like that. There's a ton of environmental interactivity in this game, and it makes the combat feel very kinetic and very reactive. And again, I'm pretty sure they've done this partially to give it that action movie feel, because that's how it works in a movie, right? Whenever heroes are fighting villains, things explode. There's all kinds of environmental destruction that happens, you know, rubble peeling off from the road surface and things just bursting into splinters and all sorts of stuff like that. And they've definitely taken that sort of cinematic, kinetic idea and implemented it into the combat in this game so that the combat feels very satisfying. They've got a lot of like hit stop and time slows and stuff for when you really impact enemies, so it makes every hit feel really strong and just really impactful and satisfying in general. This also, of course, carries through with the sound effects, which are really nice, and all the particle effects are very pretty and very effective at conveying a sense of weight and impact to your blows, which makes sense because you're supposed to be superheroes, right? So you hit really hard. Every hero has a deck of up to 8 cards that they can take into battle with them. Well, I guess I shouldn't say up to 8, it has to be exactly 8. And there are 3 different types of cards that you can choose from. There's attacks, which are exactly what you would think, just basic standard damage dealing attacks. There are skills, which tend to be things like healing or curative things or other special utility effects. And then there's heroics, which use a special resource called heroism that you gain by playing the other 2 types of cards. And these are like your big signature heroic abilities that do all sorts of powerful things that you need to save up for. Every hero's deck has to have not only 8 cards, but it has to have at least 1 of each type of card in it for it to be valid, and no more than 4 of any individual type. So you can customize these decks however you want. Everyone will of course start with just the 8 cards that they initially come with, but as you complete missions you will get these things called gamma coils, which they're basically card packs. You can take them to the forge back at your base in between missions and break them apart into multiple cards to choose from, and they will have random cards of the 3 heroes that you took on the mission to get them. So it's not entirely 100% random. They are only going to be cards that belong to the heroes that actually obtained the coil on that mission in the first place. So you do have some control over it. And you can just build your decks however you want and send them into battle. And you will of course draw cards every turn. You can play cards in any order that you want. There isn't an AP system or anything like that, and characters all take simultaneous turns. You can just press tab to switch between characters to move them around if you want, and whatever card you play will automatically cause that particular character to move. So it is never one individual hero's turn. Instead, you just play from your hand in whatever order you want, and you get by default 3 card plays per turn. And environmental interactions, like throwing things at people and stuff, they take heroism to do, but they don't take a card play to do, so they're sort of like semi-free actions, you could say. You'll also get 2 redraws per turn that you can use to just discard something in your hand and draw something else, and you also get 1 movement, which is actually not per character. This is 1 move for everyone, so you can only move a character once per turn, although it's less limiting than it sounds because characters will automatically move to attack. So that's not counted as a move, that's just something that automatically happens if you use a card that is going to cause them to need to be in a different position. The move is for actually deliberately repositioning them. So you will use this, for instance, if a character has an attack that hits in a big straight line in front of them, you may want to move them so that it lines up perfectly to hit a whole bunch of enemies at once, or maybe there's a big AoE going off on one part of the level, so you want to move them out of that AoE to keep them safe, or something like that. You can use these moves for other things as you advance in the game as well, like pushing enemies around and stuff, but for the most part they're used to strategically reposition someone for a specific reason. Also, every enemy will have an intent above their heads that will show you who they're targeting, so you always know who they're going to attack. It doesn't show exactly what they're going to do, it just shows who they're going to do it to. So you always at least know that much. And there are tons of different card effects and keywords and all sorts of things like that, and honestly the combat in this game is a blast. It is really, really fun combat because every character has a bunch of their signature things that you would expect them to be able to do. Oftentimes characters have specific gimmicks as well that make them play differently. Like for instance, Iron Man has cards that if you burn a discard on them will improve some aspect of them, give them a new keyword or some sort of new capability. Magic can create portals for like zoning purposes and throw enemies all around the arena. Spider-Man can bind people, which is like a stun but better because the stun breaks if they take damage, whereas the bind doesn't, which makes sense because that's kind of Spider-Man's thing, right? He likes to shoot webs at people and make it so they can't move. Captain Marvel, if you play 3 of her cards together, you can actually cause her to go binary, which will drastically increase her damage for a while and also give her a bunch of armor. The effect does wear off if she loses all of her armor, but it gives her a bunch of it, and she even has other cards that are meant to take advantage of this to make her into a tank, like big AoE taunting cards, for instance. So yeah, I can't really say enough good things about the combat in this game. It really works perfectly well. Like it's just a really fun, genuinely enjoyable to take part in combat system with really fun characters, some awesome abilities, really good sense of impact and weight to the combat, and a lot of environmental interactivity to make the levels, although small, more visually interesting because stuff gets thrown around everywhere and it just is really fun to watch. It's a good spectacle while also being tactical enough to be challenging, especially on the higher difficulties. But one thing that surprised me a lot about this game right from the outset is how much stuff there is to do outside of the battles, because although the battles do take up a lot of your time while playing, there's a ton of downtime as well. Every morning you can talk to various characters, solve some of their problems, do little side quests for them. You can reveal new cards and upgrade cards by fusing duplicates of them together with different resources. You can scour the grounds for resources and spar with other characters to improve their relationship with you and give them bonuses for the next combat. You can send them on away missions to improve some of their capabilities, and there's just a crap load of stuff to do. And after a mission, it will become nighttime when you come back, and at night there are other things available for you to do as well than what's available in the daytime. You can hang out with characters in clubs if you have the resources to do so, which can improve your relationship with them and often give you new access to other cards that you may not otherwise get for those characters, depending on what the club is. You can also just explore the Abbey grounds themselves, and the Abbey that's the hub area in between missions is really large and actually really fun to explore. They've managed to give it this really good sense of kind of creepy mystery, and it's actually really fun to just walk around it and try and solve all of its various puzzles and things, and you can do it at your own pace. You're not encouraged to do this if you don't want to, but if you do want to, there's all sorts of things you can find. There's optional challenge missions that you can go onto to get special powers that allow you to explore even more of the grounds and uncover even more of its mysteries and unlock more clubs for people and unlock new hangout spots that you can take characters to improve their relationship with you. You can find these chests that are full of consumables and cosmetic rewards for other characters, like new palettes for their costumes or entirely new costumes or new decorations for your character. And for your bedroom back at the Abbey as well, you can find various collectibles like vessels, apothecary vessels, journal pages, and all sorts of things like that, which will give you permanent bonuses for your entire party, as well as improving your arcane knowledge level, which will net you more cosmetic rewards from those chests. You can pet various animals for actual permanent bonuses to your entire party, and some other stuff like that. So yeah, there's just a huge amount of stuff to do outside of the battles, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't expect the hub to be this large and this detailed and have this much stuff to uncover, but it's genuinely a joy to just explore the grounds and find new collectibles and new stuff to improve all of your heroes with. Not to mention there's also other upgrade systems, like the ability to research new upgrades for the forge and for the sparring area, which can unlock all sorts of new things, like the ability to craft cards, the ability to craft consumables, and all sorts of other bonuses, some character specific, some for everyone. There's just so much content in this game. I wasn't expecting the hub to be this drastically large and full of things to do, but I guess I should have probably expected that, because that's how XCOM was, right? Like, especially XCOM 2, your base in XCOM 2 is quite detailed and has a lot of management to do in between missions, and this is basically the same thing, but with the addition of a full 3D explorable environment as well. But earlier I mentioned something that I often have a problem with in these games that this particular one manages to avoid, and that's the fact that when it comes to superhero games, the superheroes are already very, very established characters. So there's very little room for character development, because these have existed for like decades, most of them. They've already got several world-saving adventures under their belt. They already exist as established people, so not much you can do in a game is going to change them in any meaningful way, because they're already so established as people. But they managed to get around that in this game in two different ways. One is that they introduce you, your main character, and your main character is an original character to the game that you create yourself, so that obviously gives extra wiggle room, because that is someone new for everyone to interact with that they don't already have a friendship with, so that improves things a little bit. But also there's the fact that a lot of the characters in this game are from very disparate teams that in the comic book continuities have not really interacted much with each other. So there's still room for character development in this game, because the character development is about how they interact with each other, less about how they grow themselves as people and more about how they actually see each other and how they view the struggles of each individual team coming together for one purpose. So you've got characters like, say, the Avengers, a very established world-saving team, so people like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Captain Marvel, but you've also got some lesser-known people like the Runaways, for instance, so you're going to see people like Nico, aka Sister Grimm, and also people like the X-Men, so you're going to see Wolverine and Magic. And there are also heroes that are just sort of affiliated with these groups in different ways, but aren't necessarily a part of any one individually, like the newest Ghost Rider or Spider-Man, or even Blade is here. So there's a lot of variety in the sort of walks of life that each of these hero groups comes from, and that makes them coming together to mingle actually pretty interesting to watch, because they've managed to sort of mesh these comic book continuities together and make these characters that don't normally interact with each other actually interact, so there's still room for them to develop. One thing I was afraid of was that the Avengers were going to sort of take the floor and steal the thunder from everyone else, because of how much everyone loves the Avengers and how important they are as heroes. But what I didn't expect was that this is actually going to be a plot point in the game, that the other characters were already here as part of the Midnight Suns, and they feel the Avengers are kind of self-important, puffing up their chests, and just sort of came in and took everything over because everyone already loves them. I didn't expect them to actually address this point in universe and actually make you sort of arbitrate on trying to get these people to get along because of how they feel about that. And I think that's actually a really good way to assuage people's fears that the Avengers are going to be the all-important heroes that steal everyone's show, and it turns out that everyone's already aware of that possibility and very much wants you to stop that from happening. Also, there's one thing that I noticed that I just wanted to compliment because it's a problem that was deftly avoided. You know the Final Fantasy Tactics problem where all of the content in the game scales up to the level of your main character and no one else does, so that if you're like level 30 and you take a bunch of level 10 new recruits with you on a random encounter, they're going to get totally obliterated because they're going to all be getting like one shot by angry chocobos dropping meteors on them or something. Well, in this game they managed to avoid that problem because they do the same thing where the content scales with the level of your main character, but in this game, whenever your main character levels up, any one of your heroes in your party that is below your main character's level will also gain one at the same time. This means that even if you've neglected some heroes for a couple of missions, they still manage to keep up. This is really useful because it means you don't have to grind a bunch of overly difficult missions with lower level characters just so they stand a chance, and I really appreciate that. In a game with this many playable heroes and a strict limit of 3 per mission, it could become very easy for some people to be left out and fall behind and become useless because they were too low of a level. So I like the fact that everyone can surpass your main character in level if they want to. They're not forced to be the same level, it's just that they don't fall far behind. There is also, of course, the other elephant in the room that I need to mention, and that this game does have a premium currency. It does have microtransactions, which is not something that I'm in support of in a full-priced game. I don't think those things should coexist, but even though I'm not going to excuse that being in this game, and if you don't want to play it for that reason, I totally understand, I do have to say that this is probably the only game with a microtransaction store that I've ever played that basically does not draw any attention to it whatsoever. And if you're like me and you want to ignore that sort of thing and not play any part of it at all, it's actually really easy to do so because the game never advertises its store to you. It never forces you to go to it as part of the tutorial or anything. It doesn't show you that there's a store. Really, the only way you'll know that there's a store is on the main menu. After that, it pretty much never mentions it again. And you can even earn cosmetics just by playing the game. In fact, there are certain things like legendary cards and legendary costumes that you can only earn by maxing out characters' affections towards you. And all the other costumes and color palettes and things you can earn from either buying them with gloss, which you get from completing missions, or by finding them in those chests that you can find around the Abbey grounds by exploring. So, as much as I don't like the idea of microtransactions in a $60 game, I also have to say that it's so easy not to care about them in this game that they really don't bother me, because at no point are they put in front of your face and made to be this big deal that you have to interact with in some way. It really is super easy to just ignore them and pretend they're not there, because the game won't force you to do anything about them, which is the way that I prefer it. I would prefer it even more if they weren't there at all, but they're so easy to ignore, I just honestly don't care. So if you're looking for a really enjoyable tactical combat experience, if you're looking for a really fun superhero-based game, if you just like Marvel, if you just like XCOM and you want to play the new game by the developers, there are a lot of different crowds that could have a lot of fun in this game, but overall, if you enjoy tactical combat, if you enjoy character management in between missions in a cool hub area, if you enjoy tactics RPGs and want something kind of similar to that, this game really appeals a lot to various different like strategy and RPG gaming demographics, and it does a really, really good job of having actually enjoyable combat with some really fun character and base management in between missions that's actually pretty meaningful and has a lot of fun character interactions and stuff. There's a lot here, a surprisingly large amount of content in this game, and I would absolutely recommend it. I think it is actually worth full price, somewhat of a rarity for AAA games these days, but it does a really good job of just being fully featured, having really slick production values, and just being a genuinely enjoyable time to play. I've lost a lot of time to this game already, and I'm going to be losing more after I make this video, because it really is just that fun. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. Of course, I will put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for this game if you wish to check it out. And I'll see you guys next time.